Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ty, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to draft a basic bodice sloper. And the sloper that I'll be drafting today, it will not include ease. It's pretty much going to be your exact measurements. And the reason why I like to draft my slopers without any extra ease or all that stuff, because my basic bodice is always the pattern that I use to pretty much create any other pattern ever that I ever create. And so when it comes to like different ease and stuff like that, the ease is determined based off of what type of garment you're making. Now, if you're creating a garment that is more form-fitting, like a bodycon attire or swimwear or gymnastics, whatever anything that's like very, very tight and it requires like maybe stretch fabric or whatever, the ease will always pretty much be negative. So that means that you will be taking away some inches from your pattern. And if you're making something like a cardigan or a duster or something that is a little bit looser to the body, then the ease will be a little bit more dramatic as far as adding a lot of additional inches to your pattern. So the reason why when I create my basic bodice patterns I do not add any type of ease to it or any of that stuff is because I want it to be to where it is my body exactly. So then when I do go about creating my other patterns that requires ease and all that good stuff, then that's when I will either add or take away like inches in certain areas, such as like the waist or the hip or the bust and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you go to my website, I will actually have a link in the description bar below where I will have a blog post for this actual tutorial where I have created a resource guide for you to be able to download and print out to follow along with the tutorial on creating this bodice sloper. And the reason why I decided to do these this series of creating like the basic bodice sloper and the basic bodice skirt block and all that kind of stuff is because a lot of my tutorials that I have in store for you guys require you to have those basic things, because like I said, pretty much all of my patterns that I create, I'm creating them from a basic bodice sloper or skirt block or basic pants and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I felt like it was important for me to go ahead and give you guys a detailed video tutorial on how to actually create your own bodice using your very own measurements. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. Let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you in the end. Alright, so what you want to do is go ahead and mark your point A. That will be the first point that we will start with creating our actual block. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create the basic block to be the foundation of us creating our actual bodice pattern. Alright, now from point A to point B, we're going to mark our front waist length. Now remember, whenever you're marking a length, the line will be vertical, and when you're marking a circumference, the line will be horizontal. So when you're marking the circumference, it will go across, and when you're marking a length, it will go down. All right, so let's go ahead and mark our point A to point B, and from point A here, you want to go down to the length of your front waist measurement. All right, so as you can see here, I marked down, I went down the length of my front waist measurement and I marked that point B. Now from point B to C, we're going to do half of our bust circumference. So whatever the full circumference of your bust was, whatever that measurement was, you want to divide that number in half and go from point B to C, making a horizontal line across. So as you can see here, I went over half of my bust circumference and I marked that point C. Now from point C to D, you want to mark your back waist length. So that's going to be a vertical line going up. That will be your back waist length. So go ahead and draw a line to point D, marking your back waist length. All right, so as you can see here, I marked my back waist length to point D. Now, what we're going to do for point E is find the center of line B and C. So this line here, we want to find the center and mark it point E. All right, now from point E, we're going to draw a vertical line up to point A, pretty much parallel to point A, and that will be point F. So draw a vertical line all the way up to, that's parallel to point A. All right, so now we're going to connect the points A and the point F, and that will be our shoulder line. All right, so now I want you to go to point D. And what we're going to do is create a horizontal line that measures half the shoulder across measurement. And we're going to mark that point G. Okay, so now before we move forward, I want to go ahead and label the lines that we already have on here. So I want you to label your line AB, center front, and label your line CD, center back. Then I want you to label your line B to C, the waistline. And then I want you to label your line A through F and your line G and D, shoulder line. All right, now to move forward, what I want you to do is find the center of line D and C. Find the center of that center back line and mark that point H. All right, so now to create point I want you to draw a line from the point H that you just created, and I want you to go all the way to the center front. So draw a line all the way to the center front. All right, so I marked that point I. Now on the line that we just created, I want you to label that the bust line. Since we've labeled that the bust line, now for the next point, I want you to go to point G and draw a line from point G all the way down to the bust line. And I want you to mark that H1, point H1. All right, so now what we're going to do is take our H to I line here, our bust line, our forward bust line, and we're going to divide that bust. We're going to measure that line and divide that line by 5, and then we're going to add 0.625 inches. Then we're going to take that number and from point H1 over towards, pretty much you're going to measure point H1 towards that center front line. You're going to measure towards that line to the left, and you're going to mark that point I1. All right, so as you can see here, what I did was I pretty much made the line red so you can actually see the line. I took that measurement and I went over towards the center front from the H1 point. I went over the length of the measurement and I marked that point I1. So now what I want you to do is measure from your point D to your point H, and I want you to divide that number by 3. All right, now, so I want you to take that number that you just got from that calculation. I want you to go up from H, the length of that number. I want you to mark that point J. All right, so as you can see here in red, I went up that measurement. I pretty much took a third of this line here, and took that number and I went up from point H to point J. No. All right, now, so from that point J, I want you to draw a line all the way to the center front. All right, so after you draw your line from point J to the center front, I want you to mark that point K. All right, so now what I want you to do is the line that we just created, the K and J line, I want you to label this line chest. Okay, now, so what I want you to do is go to point I1 and draw a line all the way up to that chest line, just a straight line. It'll be a 90-degree angle line up to the chest, and we're going to mark that point K1. All right, so I labeled that point K1, and then what I went ahead and did was went over to H1, and where that line crossed the chest line, I labeled that point J1. So go ahead and do that as well. All right, and after you've labeled your K1 and J1 points, I want you to go ahead and finish off this block foundation by drawing a line from K1 all the way up to that shoulder line and marking that point F1. All right, you guys, so we've completed the portion of laying out our foundation block for our bodice pattern tutorial. Now, the next steps that we'll be going into is creating our actual neck curve and our shoulder line, our dropped shoulder line. So go ahead and stay tuned for that. Now, let's go ahead and get started on our neck and shoulders. Now, what I want you to do before we move forward is label this left side over here. I want you to label that front. And then what I want you to do is label this side over here to the right. I want you to label that back. And what this will do is pretty much help you distinguish between which side we will be working on when we're working on our neck and our shoulders and all that good stuff. All right, so after you label your front and your back, I want you to go to point G and go down 0.675 inches from point G, and I want you to mark that point L. All right, so here you see my point L. It isn't as prominent as the other points, but here you can see my point L. All right, so now what I want you to do is find the center of line G and D. I want you to find the center of this line, and then I want you to go over 0.75 inches towards D. All right, and once you've marked that point, I want you to label that point M. Now we're going to go from point M, we're going to go up 1 inch and mark that point N. All right, so we've marked that point N, and now what I want you to do is draw your curve here from point N to point D. We're going to draw a curve from point N to point D. All right, so as you can see, we formed our back neckline, and here's our back neck curve right here. Now, from point N, I want you to get a ruler. All right, so now as you can see, I have a ruler for illustrative purposes. Now from point N, I want you to draw an intersecting line. I want you to intersect that line through point L from point N, starting at point N. Your line is going to intersect point L, and I want you to mark your shoulder length. The shoulder length that you have written down, I want you to measure out your shoulder length from point N. I want the line to intersect through that point L, and go ahead and mark that shoulder length. All right, so as you can see here, I used my ruler and went from point N and I measured all the way down, intersecting that point L, and I plotted my shoulder measurement, and I labeled that point N1, as you can see here. All right, so what I realized is that I forgot to label a line here, and this is the F and the E line, and I want you to label that line side. All right, so we've labeled that side. Now what I want you to do is where the side line intersects the bust line, I want you to create a point there and label that point O. All right, now from that point O to point J1 to that point N1. So you're going to be going from N1 to J1 to O. And this is where we're going to create our armhole curve. So go ahead and create your armhole curve. All right, so I've created my armhole curve, and what I wanted to do is put a little more emphasis on that armhole curve so you can see the shape of it. All right, so now for the front, what I want you to do is start at point A, and I want you to take your across shoulder measurement, divide that number by 6, and then I want you to measure from point A going across on the shoulder line and measure from point A going down the center front. Whatever number that is you get, you want to measure that across from point A on the shoulder line and also from point A on the center point. All right, so as you can see here, I labeled those 2 points, point P and point 1. So I took my across shoulder measurement, I divided that number by 6, and then I marked that measurement from point A along the shoulder line and along the center front. And I labeled the point on the shoulder line P and the point on the center front P1. Now what I want you to do is draw the neck hole or the neck curve along the P and the P1. Draw a curve. All right, and we've created our front neck curve. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the front shoulder. All right, so now what I want you to do is go to point F1 here, and I want you to go down 2 inches from F1. All right, and you want to go ahead and label that point Q. All right, so now the same technique that we used on the back bodice to create our shoulder, we're going to do the same here on the front bodice. So we're going to take our ruler, our metric ruler, and we're going to measure out the length of our shoulder on that line along that P from the point P. I'm sorry. So we're going to measure our shoulder length from point P and intersect through Q and go ahead and measure that line. All right, so as you can see here, I measured out my shoulder length, and I'm going to mark the end of that shoulder length, point Q1. All right, now we're going to go from point Q1 to K1 and then to point O, ending in point O, we're going to draw our front armhole curve from point Q1 to K1 to O. All right, so as you can see here, I've made my front armhole prominent so you can see, get an idea of how your curve should look when creating the curve of your armhole. All right, so that completes this portion of the neck and the armhole and the shoulders. All right, so now we're going to work on the waist measurement, the waist portion of the bodice. Now what I want you to do is start at point C, and I want you to mark down your calculated back waist measurement and add your dart, and I want you to mark that along the waistline. All right, so as you can see here, I marked my back waist measurement, and then I labeled that point R. Now what I want you to do is go up to your bust line, and I want you to measure between point H and point H1 here. So I want you to find the center of that line between point H and H1. Find the center of that line there. All right, and I want you to label that point S. Remember, it's the center point of the line H and H1. So measure between H and H1. Find the center of that point, mark that S. All right, so now from this point S here, I want you to draw a line to the waistline, and I want you to mark that point T. All right, now from that point T, we're going to measure out the length of our dart starting at the center point of T, of course. So if your dart is 1 inch, what you're going to do is measure 0.5 inches to the left and measure 0.5 inches to the right. You want the dart to be centered from point T. All right, so now what we're going to do is from the 2 points that the new points that we just made, the line, the width of our dart, what we're going to do is go ahead from both outer points, we're going to connect the line from both points to point S. All right, so as you can see from both points that we created, this is the full width of our dart. We went ahead and created a diagonal line going to point S, and this is our back dart. All right, so now that we've created our back dart, we want to go ahead and close the side of our back bodice by creating a line from point R to point O. All right, so as you can see, our back bodice is now complete. We're going to go ahead and work on the waist portion of our front bodice. And what we're going to do is go to point B, and we're going to mark our front waist, our calculated front waist measurement, plus the dart. And we're going to mark that on our waistline. All right, so as you can see here, I've labeled that point U. And now what I want you to do is go to your bust line, and we're going to do the same thing that we did on the back. We're going to do that on the front. So we're going to measure the distance between I and I1, and we're going to find the center of that measurement. So find the center of the line I and I1. All right, so I found the center of that line and I labeled that S1. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw a 90-degree angled line. I'm going to draw a line from S1 all the way down to my waistline. All right, so as you can see, I drew my line down to the waistline and I labeled that point T1. All right, so now I want you to go to point S1 and I want you to measure down 2.5 inches on that S1 and T1 line. All right, so as you can see here, I've measured 2.5 inches down from S1 and I created a point. You don't have to label that point. You can just leave that point. That will be considered the dart point. Now from T1, I want you to do the same thing that you did on the back. I want you to go ahead and measure out your dart measurement from the center of T1. All right, so as you can see, I've created my dart width right here. And what I'm going to do is from the 2 endpoints that I've created from my dart width, I'm going to draw a line to that dart point right there that we created. That was 2.5 inches down from point S1. All right, now, so as you can see, I've created my front dart. And now what I want you to do is go ahead and create and close your side. Create your side line for your front bodice by drawing a line from point O to point U. All right, so now we're finished with the bodice portion of our basic bodice block. Now this next step is optional, but I'm going to go ahead and add it because it's very, very needed sometimes when you're creating certain tops. I definitely like to add the hip attachment and the waist shaping to my basic bodice block. But I would suggest you do this next couple of steps because it's just so much easier if you actually go ahead and have the hip attached to it. And whenever you need to not have the hip, or if you just need just the top bodice portion like this one here, then you can just cut the hip portion away. Now, so we're going to work on the hip portion of our basic bodice. And we're going to start off by creating some waist shaping on our pattern. All right, now to create your waist shaping, what I want you to do is start at point B, and I want you to go down 0.75 inches from point B and label that point B1. All right, and I want you to also go to point C and go down 0.75 inches and label that C1. All right, now that I've created my point B1 and my point C1, I want you to draw a line from B1 to point U. Draw a line. All right, so I've connected my line. I drew a line from point B1 to point U, and now I'm going to do the same on the back. I'm going to connect the line from point C1 to point R. All right, and I've drawn my line from point C1 to point R, and this right here completes the waist shaping portion. All right, now we're going to go ahead and work on our hip attachment. All right, so from point B here, I want you to go down 8 inches, which is the standard measurement for your waist to hip measurement. So go down 8 inches. All right, so I've created my point here and I labeled that point B. And now I'm going to go over to point C and I'm going to go down 8 inches as well and label that one point V1. All right, now I'm going to draw a line from point V to point V1. All right, so I'm going to label the line that I just drew. I'm going to label that the hip line. All right, now, so from V1, what we're going to do is mark our calculated hip measurement for our back hip. We're going to mark our calculated hip measurement for our back hip. All right, so as you can see here, I've marked my back hip my calculated back hip measurement from point V1 and I labeled that point W. All right, so what happens is when you mark your calculated back measurement, it's going to automatically create your calculated front measurement because what we did was we took our full hip measurement, divided it by 4, and then took that number for the back and added 0.25. And the 0.25 inches that we added to the back, we took away from the front. So it will automatically equal out the original hip circumference divided by 4. Now what we're going to do is draw a line from R to W and a line from U to W to close out the sides of our hip on our bodice. So what we're going to do to create our darts for our hip portion, we're going to start at that T1 point and we're going to measure down 4.25 inches. All right, so what we're going to do is go to point T and we're going to measure down 5.5 inches. All right, so now after creating our 2 dart lengths, we're going to go to the width of the dart and we're going to draw a straight line down to meet the waist shaping of the hip on both the front and the back. All right, so now I've created those lines. Now I'm going to connect the end of those points to the end of the length of the dart on both the front and the back. All right, so now our darts have been created on our hip attachment. All right, you guys, so you've completed your basic bodice pattern, and this is the finished look here. Now that I've completely completed my pattern, I went ahead and kind of curved my sides, and I want you to, the top portion of your bodice, I want you to slightly curve it inwards, and the curve should be a little bit more in towards the waist portion of the bodice versus the arm portion, the armhole portion. So as you can see here, I curved it a little bit in, and then for the bottom portion, I curved it out. So you want to curve it a little bit out and more towards the hip portion of the bodice. It will be curved more outward towards the hip portion, but around the waist portion, it will be pretty much the same as the waist, and then it will slightly curve outward. So just go ahead and just shape it a little bit by just shaping the curve of the bodice. All right, so after reshaping my side, as you can see, there's a little bit more curve to it. It's not a dramatic curve, but it's a little bit more curve, which looks more like the shape of a woman's body. So this right here will be your completed pattern look. I'm going to show you how to remove the darts because some patterns do take dartless bodices. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove the dart. Now what you want to do is super duper easy. What you want to do is go to your waist point, your waistline here, and you want to draw out your calculated waist measurement. I'm going to go ahead and mark my calculated waist measurement from the center front line and then the calculated waist measurement from the center back line. All right, so as you can see, I've created my new waistline here. All right, so now what you want to do is create a new side line. So you're going to start at the end of that armhole point and you're going to draw a new line to the new waistline point. And then you're going to draw a line from that new waistline point to the hip point, and you're going to do that on both the front and the back. All right, so now as you can see, we have a new side and we have a new waistline here. And what you want to do as well is transfer that waist shaping line to your new pattern. Onto your new side and your new waistline as well. All right, so this is your completed dartless bodice pattern. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. Remember to go check out my website. I'll leave the link in the description bar below, where you can get a lot of different resources and a lot more information. Just some things that you cannot get in the actual video. You'll get a lot more information there. So make sure I leave the link in the description bar below. And like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Just if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, or requests, just leave them in the comment section below. Remember to always embrace every part of you and always be beautifully you. All right, guys, see you in my next video. Bye. All right, you guys, don't forget to click the link in the description bar below to get the resource guide to follow along with this tutorial. It includes a lot of information that will be very helpful when creating your basic bodice sloper and following along with this tutorial. So be sure to click the link below. It will send you to the blog post, and the blog post will have the link to download the resource guide. And yeah, it's just pretty much easy.